I'm trying to grow some shrooms but it's taking forever, so I had the urge to take a journey and I had ordered some San Pedro cactus cuttings 12 feet tipped. All day Friday I fasted, eating nothing but a banana, and that night I skinned them and cut out the spines. Then I cut out the core and froze them overnight. In the morning I thawed them slightly and put them in the blender with some lemon juice and hit puree. I then took the froth and put it in a jar and waited for the juice to settle in the bottom. I then ran it through a strainer to separate the juice from the froth. I gagged down the slimy, disgusting juice with some saltine crackers and repeated this process about 3 more times till I thought I was gonna hurl. I saved the rest of the sludge for another time and got ready for my journey. I packed up my Native American flutes and my didgeridoo and put on some warm clothes because it was chilly that day. Packed them into my car with some water and pistachios and dried fruit and headed for the freshly snow-dusted foothills of Colorado just west of Denver. I drove up a windy canyon, trying not to throw up in my car, to a spot I had hiked earlier that week which seemed to be a good place for the journey. And it was. As I hiked up the trail in the cool mountain air, my stomach settled a bit and I started feeling better and better. I looked at the trees with the light coating of dusty snow. It was a whole different atmosphere that day. The sky was gray and the clouds hung low. I took a right onto the smaller trail as it forked. And I began to enter the enchanted forest. Little trees and rocks seemed to welcome me there. All very friendly. The aspen trees had laid out round golden speckles on the forest floor and on the path as if to welcome me. All was quiet in the still of the forest. I continued to climb the path as anxiety overwhelmed me and I knew I was getting close to her. I quickened my pace as my body began to pulse with pleasure. Breaking out of the forest I saw the auditorium. Grass and trees waited in their places for the concert to begin. The aspen trees fluttered in the cool breeze as I entered the sacred concert hall. Finally I saw her, sitting there as proud as when I had left her. In my mind's voice I greeted her. She looked so nice. A sight for sore eyes. Yes, my beautiful rock. My stage, my trusted friend, ancient and wise. I hurried up to her and climbed upon her back. She was happy to see me as I was to see her. I could feel the release in the back of my neck and my stomach danced as I looked out at my audience of aspens, evergreens, flowers, grasses and majestic moss-covered boulders as they eagerly awaited in silence. The small forest creatures scurried about at ease with my presence there. I sat there as silence absorbing it all, making them all wait. I pulled out my cherrywood flute and the spirit of the forest overtook me. I played her song in the chilly mountain air. The high and low tones cut through the valleys and echoed off the hills. I stumbled around in bliss as I played from the deep places inside of me. I felt the blood of my ancestors pulse through my warm veins. Condensation dripped from the air holes and my cold fingers fluttered and danced on the finger holes. I sat there interchanging from cherry to cedar to blonde-colored flutes, all with their own distinct tones. The golden leaves danced on their branches as I played. Sitting upon my rock I closed my eyes and played a deep, slow, sad melody. My eyes were closed but I heard dogs moaning behind me. I continued playing and opened my eyes to see a young man and 2 dogs walking down the trail. The dogs whined and growled as they passed me. I continued to play my haunting tones unaffected by their presence there. The young man, seemingly overcome with fright, quickened his pace as my song seemed to drive him out of that sacred valley. When my hands became too numb to hold the notes I grabbed my didge and climbed down to the northwest face of my beauty. I then noticed something that I had not before. Several lines in the rock all converged at a point on the ground and there was a hole just right to stick the end of my didge into. My rock begged me to speak to her in the ancient drone. I placed my didge in the hole and fitted my mouth to the waxy mouthpiece and began my communion with her. As my lips subtly vibrated over the mouthpiece I had the feeling that I was kissing her. The sound was incredible. I could feel the sound waves pulsating off of her. It was like I was communicating with her, giving her a voice. I have never heard a rock sing until that day and it was a magnificent experience. My eyes were again closed and I watched as subtle patterns formed on my eyelids as I played. I felt a warm excited feeling in my stomach and down my spine emanating from the back of my neck. I felt the beauty of this place and time seemed to stand still. I then opened my eyes and concentrated on the brightly colored moss growing on her and the way the colors of the granite and moss seemed to warp together like a mosaic pattern, like an artwork, and all of a sudden I started to see her faces. There were many of them everywhere I looked as the lines, crevices and textures formed all kinds of different faces. Some resembled animals and others looked like old men and others looked like nothing I had ever seen before. It was beautiful. I was awestruck by it all and just sat motionless staring at it for about 5 minutes or so. I was reminded of the paintings by Bev Doolittle, where you can see faces in the landscapes that she paints. Now I know where she got the idea. I also recalled the movie, Return to Oz, where the Gnome King and his servants would follow Dorothy around Oz spying on her within the rocks, and their faces would move through the rocks and appear in them. This was a very interesting phenomenon and probably the highlight of my experience. I continued to play my didge until I felt the need to return to my flutes. I continued this pattern for the rest of the afternoon. Finally I was compelled to pack up my things and climb the hill back to the main trail. I continued to play my flutes as I made my way up the hill, stopping at various points along the way to listen to the acoustics of that particular spot and to check out the mossy rocks and various plant life and colors. As I descended down the other side of the hill, still playing my tones, I met up with an older lady with an Irish accent. She told me she had been listening to me and how beautiful it was and how the scenery reminded her of Ireland. We talked and walked down the trail, noticing the wonderful surroundings to where the cars were parked, and bid farewell. As I drove back down the winding canyon listening to some Celtic music, I could see wonderful patterns in the canyon walls. The movement of the car was very smooth and soothing, like driving on clouds. The warm air from the heater sent chills through my body like I had never felt before. Very nice. And every so often I would receive pleasant sensations throughout my body, almost like riding a roller coaster but not as intense. A huge grin enveloped my face and I felt very happy and at peace. All the troubles in the world seemed to be so pointless and futile. I even started to have affectionate feelings for my car, thinking of how loyal and dependable she's been to me. When I arrived home I was hungry and warmed up a cup of chia tea and found some cold pizza in the fridge. Our kitchen, being remodeled with hardwood floors and wood cabinets, had a very nice feel to it. The wood was very beautiful indeed. I went to my room and put on some relaxing downbeat techno, lit a candle and sat on my bed sipping my warm chia. I could smell the fragrance of the candle and the spices of the chia, and I looked around at my room and felt ever so cozy. I wrote some affectionate entries about my rock in my journal and drew a picture of myself standing on her playing my flute. It had been a wonderful day and I hope to do it again when I get the chance. If you are thinking about taking a journey through the use of this sacred plant, I highly recommend that you do it out in nature and plan on spending at least 4 or 5 hours outdoors. I found that fasting for at least 6 hours prior is a good thing. Also, I read that you should not eat any meat the day before. You'll need room in your stomach. Again, the extract is most disgusting and very hard to swallow, but I think the methods that I used work well and I have used them since with good results. I've also read that mescaline is like a cross between LSD and ecstasy. I've never taken ecstasy, but I would have to agree with that description by the way my journey went. Remember, setting is everything. Be in a good frame of mind and be familiar with your surroundings. You'll not be totally whacked out by this substance. It's quite subtle compared with others and you can intelligently carry on conversations with other people without them suspecting anything. Please use caution, have a safe journey and use the experience to further your knowledge and understanding of creation. Side note. I recently discovered some very nice SP specimens for sale at Home Depot. I purchased 2 of them, one about 2 foot and the other about 7 inch. I don't know if I have the heart to sacrifice them though, and the larger one has longer dark-colored spikes and more thin ribs than the SP I used, so I'm not sure what species it is. I'm hoping it's a Peruvian torch, but I can't be sure. They also have a double 6-footer and 4-footer in one planter there for $99. I'm very tempted to go buy it. Anyways, I was pleasantly surprised to find them there, so go check out your local HD or garden center. Chances are you'll find one.